So I want to share with you an interesting story. You know, you've heard a lot about synchronicity this week. People have kept using that phrase, synchronicity, as the word implies, synchronos, many things happening all at the same time. And I've been a student of synchronicity for many years. In fact, I've written a book called Synchrodestiny, or Spontaneous Fulfillment of Desire. But the first time, and it's actually a very Vedantic concept, synchronicity, because according to Vedanta, the whole universe is a conspiracy of improbable events. The whole universe is a conspiracy of improbable events. And the way Carl Jung described synchronicity was, and you may or may not know that he was a very, very good friend of Wolfgang Pauli. And they used to talk about synchronicity, and there's a book of their conversations. And the way he described it is acausal events, acausal, there's no cause-effect relationship, but acausal events that are entangled around meaning. And it's a very delightful book if you want to read it, but it's, as I said, it's also a huge concept in Vedanta, Ritambhara Pragya, when your consciousness is not caught up in the mistake of the intellect. What's the mistake of the intellect? That I and you are separate. The subject-object split. When your consciousness is not caught up in the mistake of the intellect and you experience the non-dual awareness from where we all differentiate, and you surrender to it, then synchronicity happens. So the reason I'm saying this is that this whole experience here is an expression of that synchronicity, and everything that's been happening, my meeting with Rudy, a lot of the people that I'm familiar with, now the new people around in our lives, they're all kind of, in a sense, acausal events entangled through meaning. I teach a course at Kellogg Business School called The Soul of Leadership, which I've been doing for a long time, and some of you have been to that course. And that transformed into a new course at Columbia Business School that we had, and it was called Just Capital and Cause-Driven Marketing. And the people you see here were faculty, visiting faculty on the course, except for Shahrzad. You shall be one in the future. And as a result of that course, we came up with the idea of a Just Capital Fund. We invited venture capitalists to come to listen to the students who came up with great ideas to create ventures of social entrepreneurship that would move in the direction of a more peaceful, just, sustainable world. And now we are in the process of creating that fund, which you'll hear about also. And Dylan Radigan came up with a phrase called the Cradle of Innovation, which we're going to start at Columbia University Business School, and where Gautam also went to school there, and where we're going to have people with real-life examples of what they're doing with their lives, and people that we heard this morning as well. These are the examples of really social entrepreneurship, cause-driven marketing, and I wanted to introduce our panel now because they're involved in this, just like you guys were in the morning, and that was fantastic. So I'll start with Shahrzad. Shahrzad, you were born in Iran. Yeah, use the microphone. You were born in Iran, and tell us a little bit about Iran when you were growing up.
Is this working?
Yeah, it should be working.
Sure. First of all, I'm delighted to be here, Deepak, part of the panel, and I'm very excited to share with all of you my personal experience as it relates to the theme of today's panel, which is crisis to transformation to empowerment. I was born in Iran at a time where the country was in deep state of crisis. There were 8 years of war, and there was political and economic instability. So when I was 17, I realized that this instability is not going to dissipate, that it will affect my future and my ability to grow and prosper. So I decided to move to North America by myself when I was 17, because I wanted to see actually the change that I wanted to see in my world, and to be empowered and to be able to succeed. I recognize that I'm very fortunate, and there are many others who are very talented that haven't had the ability to transform their lives the way I did with just a simple act of moving to North America. That they're still in the state of disempowerment. Helping others and providing a hand up, not a hand out, is something that I am truly, deeply passionate about.
So let me just make a couple of comments. I don't know how many people in this room know that about 60% of Iran's population is under the age of 30, and even more than 60%, 65, 70% is under the age of 20. So that's the time when she left. And these kids are not going to listen to the despotic regimes and ideologies that are so antiquated. And so Shahrzad moved to Canada, and fast forward to you have a broadband come right there.
Right, of course. So when I would like to tell you about this story, and I like to reference Jim Clifton, the chairman and CEO of Gallup. When you look at the state of the world today, out of the 7 billion people, there are 5 billion that are the age of 15 or older. And 3 billion of those, they either have a job or they want to have a job. The problem is that there are only 1.2 billion full-time jobs on our planet, which means a quarter of our population are dealing with economic instability. So this is real crisis. What Jim believes in, which I share the same point of view with him, that the force that will be driving our world in the next 30 years will not be a military force or a political force. It will be an economic force that is driven by creating jobs and equality GDP growth. When you think about transformations and tools that we have out there, there are 7 billion people that live on this planet, and there are 6 billion cell phones on this planet. So there are people on this planet that may not have food on their table, but they have cell phones. 1.2 billion of these cell phones are broadband connected. And these cell phones are becoming more and more powerful with greater softwares and hundreds of thousands of apps that allow us to interact with the apps and do just about anything, including creation of content. We no longer live in a world where we are only consuming content, where the observer is only consuming content. Everyone is and has the potential to be a content creator. eMarketer predicts that by the end of next year, there will be 114 million content creators in US alone. That's a third of the population. So what we are seeing is basically a democratization of video content, which is great because we all have the ability to tell our story. What is interesting is that there are a lot of discussions about YouTube and how YouTube has made our world a smaller place and has educated masses that allowed us to connect with each other. But there are not enough discussions about how platforms like YouTube has empowered economic, has provided actually their role in economic empowerment. At Broadband TV, what we do is we enable each individual content creator, anyone that is equipped with web and has access to broadband internet connection, to create content and make money. If you're a gamer, a musician, a comedian, you can become part of our network and you can start and make money. So the point is we have created jobs that didn't exist before. And these are jobs for people that are passionate about content creation. This is a way, a creative way to actually solve a problem, a real problem, a crisis that exists in our world, which is lack of jobs. I think we live in a world that has changed quite a bit, obviously over the past few years, and it keeps on changing. So what I see is, I think everyone needs to be more entrepreneurial. If we are all more creative, and if we leverage our creativity to solve both old and new problems in a more effective and efficient way, we'll have a better society.
And so, as CEO and chairman of this company that she created, Broadband TV.
Yes, we we're working with 3,000 publishers, and this area of our business, we are generating more than 250 million video impressions on a monthly basis.
And ultimately, the goal is to reach the youth of Iran.
Yes, of course. We're already working with Iranians, and we're working with people from Portugal, Germany, Africa, all over the world. And we're getting hundreds of new partners every month. And I think if we're all more creative, perhaps that will bring us closer to our creator, and something that in this room we may call the field of human potentiality.
Here's a thing that I wanted to point out. While, there are all kinds of cries out there on boycotting Iran and, giving them all kinds of economic deprivation and perhaps even a nuclear attack from Israel, what you're doing could actually be much more effective for the youth of Iran.
Exactly, because it gives them voice.
Because it gives them a voice, and it gives them creativity, opportunity, possibly jobs, to change the zeitgeist of Iran. So thanks.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, actually, give it to Shauna first. Okay, Shauna. A brief description of your story.
Okay. I was born in Inner Mongolia, China. My mom was a tiger mom. Actually, before she had me, because in China we had a one-child policy, she had 2 abortions before having me because both times they were girls. And when she was pregnant with me, the doctor told her, again, it's a girl. And not only is it a girl, but she's got a heart disease. So you probably should get an abortion. My mom, who was not religious at the time, can't really describe what happened, but basically it's a divine intervention, and she decided to have me. And I grew up in China, being very lucky actually, because my father was one of the few people in the early 80s that had the opportunity to travel all over the world. In fact, he was responsible for matching foreign universities with Chinese universities. So instead of playing with kids outside, because I wasn't allowed to do any physical activities, I basically shadowed my father. And I was told as a very young age that basically if I lived until the age of 7, I would probably be stabilized enough to get heart surgery and actually fix the hole in my heart. It's very interesting growing up knowing and thinking about death, which is the earliest memory I had as a child. It makes you kind of appreciate every single moment of life. What happened was my father actually came to teach at Brown University in 1988. My mom actually went on vacation to go visit him because it was a great opportunity to come to the States. And in June 4th, 1989 was when the Tiananmen Square massacre happened. So my father, it was unsafe for him to return to China, so my parents basically were stuck in the United States and I was in China at the time. My family, through various methods, matched me up with a woman who actually was, a complete stranger with me, who just got a college visa to come to the States. So I was matched with her, and we flew to America together for me to be together with my family. Long story short, she passed in a car accident shortly taking me to America. So when I came to America, my parents basically, they lost their visa. They were kind of in the state of, we don't know what's going to happen. And George Bush Sr., who was president at the time, granted amnesty for Chinese Americans, Chinese people who were in America. So they were able to actually stay in the country. And then what happened was my mom was walking in the street one day and she bumped into a random guy who told her to go to church. And she ended up going to church, and when they told her to share her story, she started crying and sharing the story about me, because at this time I was a little bit over 7 years old and with no health care, with no and she was completely worried about what would happen to her daughter and my heart disease. And a man in the church came up to my mom afterwards and said, my college roommate is a heart surgeon. Can I please ask him to perform pro bono heart surgery for you? And he said yes, and we drove to the hospital to get my heart checked out. And all throughout my life, up to this point, I had had my heart looked at pretty much every 3 months. They would go in and take a picture and check the size of the hole, which actually grew as my heart grew as I grew as a child. But they couldn't locate the hole. It had completely disappeared within a 6 months period, which the doctor said was a complete miracle. There was no way, in his medical opinion, that tissue could actually grow that quickly. So I just remember that day was the happiest day of our entire family and of my life, and I was given a new opportunity to try to really make life to the fullest. And I'm really fortunate to be here today and actually be able to start the company that I now have the opportunity to start.
So fast forward, you went to MIT.
Yes, I went to MIT and I studied computer science and electrical engineering with a concentration on artificial intelligence, because I was really interested in, just figuring out how can we make the world a better place, and I wanted to study the most intense thing at the school, and AI was really, really fascinating.
And then you went to Goldman Sachs.
Yeah, after I graduated, I realized that going into academia wasn't my strength. I think I'm intelligent, but at MIT, everyone is made to feel pretty stupid because there are just crazy, crazy geniuses there. But I did realize that capital was really important, and I wanted to understand business. How do I use capital to really be able to figure out what my purpose in life was? At this point, I hadn't figured that out yet, but I knew that I needed to build the foundation. So I took a job at Goldman Sachs doing investment banking and private equity.
And now?
Yeah, and really what happened was when I got to Goldman, I was the only junior girl in the group that worked there. So I got staffed on 2 different types of deals, refinancing tampon companies and also taking luxury companies public. So I ended up, or selling luxury companies. So I ended up working on the sale of Neiman Marcus. And basically what happened was I quit Goldman, spent about 3.5 years in the luxury space. And it was a really interesting statistic that really got to me that I heard, and some of you might have heard this, that in Japan, for women in their 20s, the ratio is about 96% of women in their 20s have a Louis Vuitton bag. And when I heard this, it was just completely crazy. And what I realized was that, in America, women control 80% of the consumption power. I think actually in China, it's actually closer to 50% because men actually consume quite a lot more than men do in the States. And consumption to me was a way to communicate to women. But what was so interesting is that every girl I know, no matter what the economic level they were at, they really wanted to have that, $500 Louis Vuitton bag, or they wanted to have that Louis Vuitton shoe. And it was, how do I take that desire and the psychology that makes the luxury industry work to actually, help people to think consciously and think about what their purchases actually drive. So that idea came to me, and I started a company called Aha Life. Aha is the aha moment. And basically, Aha Life is a curated shopping destination of lifestyle products from all over the world that's centered around storytelling. So what we do is we provide a platform for artisans and designers from all over the world. Many of the products that we feature and sell are actually cause-driven, but it's not 100% cause-driven because I want that person to walk into the store, if you will. If I had a site that only sold things that were tied to good causes and the only people that cared would walk in. So we're selling luxury goods, we're selling cause-driven products, we're selling different types of things from technology to fashion to design to home to food, and we're basically giving a platform for for designers to tell their stories. On the consumer side, what it does is that it forces you to think before you buy. You now know exactly when you buy anything on our site, exactly who made it, why they were inspired to create that object, how much it cost, what was the value creation, what was the supply chain for that product to actually get to you. And hopefully through this, it just drives women and consumers to think more consciously before they buy.
And you have something called a Karma Club?
Yes, we have products called the Good Karma Club. Thank you, Deepak. And that's what I was talking about in terms of the cause-driven products. So for example, one of our products are these scarves that were designed by Lauren Bush, and each of them are hand-dyed by women in the Congo. So when you go and buy a scarf on our site, we don't hold the inventory. Actually, your dollar actually creates that job, and they physically dye the scarf as you purchase them. And the proceeds from that scarf gets donated directly back to Africa.
Thanks. Renata?
We have two scientists, two computer scientists.
Yes. Renata, your story.
Thanks, Deepak. I think this whole talk is basically just to kind of see how you have to have a transformation from crisis, because if you don't have a transformation from crisis, then I guess what Deepak said, you're basically screwed. So we are all testaments of being able to transform from crisis, and I think that it's something, a little bit of mix of a free will along with destiny. And my personal story is I was adopted at a very young age. My parents both died, and I was with my grandmother. That's who I was supposed to stay with. And her husband had died in this airplane accident. She was a little bit crazy. And I had my aunt and my uncle kidnap me from Colombia. And they took me to the United States, and they could never return back to Colombia. So here they are with this daughter, which isn't even really theirs, and they're in Miami, and they can never go back to Colombia. So I grew up, and I'm 15 years old, and some people call me Hispanic, and other people call me American, and I really don't even know what I am, right? And so I was so confused at this young age. It didn't really, these were my parents, but I had felt a deep kind of gratefulness for them, and still settle a bit of indebtedness that I needed to find myself. So at 15, I moved back to Colombia to find my roots. While I was in Colombia, I took the wrong bus, and I ended up, in Colombia, you're either rich or poor. And so we were the wealthier. And I ended up at this shanty town, and there was all these kids, and they were living in cardboard boxes. And for 1 minute, I was like, wow, you know, this really could have been me, right? And it just really dawned on me. I'm like, it was destiny that I wasn't. And I'm really fortunate to be American, and I'm really fortunate to be on top of the mountain. And if I am, wouldn't these kids want me to do something for them? Because if I was them, I would want people to do something for me. So ever since that day, and ever since that experience, I became a social entrepreneur, meaning social entrepreneur is a person who is obsessed with an idea to change something within their field. And I knew that my purpose in life was to leave the world a different place, because I was here, very clear at 15. At that point, I just experienced buying my toothpaste for the first time, so there wasn't much that I could do, right? Moving forward, I came back to the States and studied, and I took a trip around the world for a year after I graduated from University of North Carolina. Didn't get the dream job that I thought I was going to get, which was at MTV, and cried and thought my life was over, and said, well, I'll just take a trip around the world, saved my money, and traveled. On this trip, it was during the tsunami, and I was cleaning the villages, and this woman came up to me frantic, and I was wearing a tank top. You're not supposed to show your shoulders. And I'm like, look, I'm so hot. I promise tomorrow I'll wear my shirt. And she said, the translator came up to me and said, she's not saying anything about your tank top. What she said is, she knows that you have money, so could you teach her how to make it? And I was like, wow, that would be amazing. I had no idea. I'm just cleaning the village right now. But if I did, I would. So fine. So I looked into it, and I found microfinance, and I went to Bangladesh. I studied under Muhammad Yunus and his whole team, and learned microfinance. Started with 800 women in 2005. And in India, at that point, there was a lot of aid that came into the country. And they said, well, we can only give money to women who are creditworthy. So I said, okay, fine. So I'll keep their books for 2 years, and they'll become creditworthy. So we did that, and they became creditworthy. So at that point, my husband said, well, that's a real cute little Mother Teresa stump, but you can't be traveling around the world like that. So I came back to the States, and I had to figure out a way to fuel the empowerment of women, because when you empower women in crisis, they're like slingshots. I mean, their determination and their cause to be successful is like nothing else. And so I dedicated my life to the empowerment of women. And in order to do that, I saw an amazing model, which is the pink ribbon model. And we developed the brand for the empowerment of women. And we do major cause marketing campaigns with blue chip companies. The way we get our brand out is by hosting the top couture luxury lingerie shows. Because I bet you guys will never forget that. That's that girl, that Colombian girl, and she hosts lingerie shows. That's what we do. We have hosted Lingerie Miami, New York, LA. We're doing London now. So my purpose in life as a social entrepreneur, from turning this crisis into transformation, is having built 7 Bar Foundation, a brand for the empowerment of women. I've impacted over 2,500 women today, had 4 cause marketing campaigns, and in a daily struggle and obsessed with this idea, because the one thing I could relate to yesterday in the film was I'm more scared of living an unfulfilled life than of death. And every day my life is driven by this. I don't think I'm necessarily a very good wife or daughter or a sister, but I'm really good at trying to leave an impact on this world.
So broadband TV, AHA Life, 7 Bar Foundation, enormously successful social enterprises, changing the world. Danielle.
Okay. Hello. My name is Danielle. I work for Gallup. I'm not the CEO of Gallup, nor the founder, like these ladies. But that's amazing stories, and I feel blessed to know these women and have them in my life, so I'm glad their crises are over. So I work for Gallup. I know Deepak through Gallup. Deepak is a senior scientist at Gallup, which means he's almost like serves as an advisory role to the company. And this whole conference is really exciting to me because this whole tie between mind and body is something that I've been fascinated by since I was little, and I'll explain why in a second. So when I was 5, I was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is a blood cancer, and it's in the same category as leukemia. But leukemia is a pretty common cancer for a 5-year-old, whereas non-Hodgkin's lymphoma is common in older men, ages 65 and up. So we weren't really sure why I got that, and I was diagnosed in the 3rd stage. And they caught it late, and my whole story is kind of tied to well-being, and obviously that's where Deepak came in. But when they caught the cancer, I kept going into the doctor's office, and my mom kept saying something's wrong with her. She's always been a really active kid. She's getting 2s in gym class, and didn't know why. And she kept bringing me in over and over again. And so when I finally went in, they caught it in the 3rd stage. They said, she needs to go right to the emergency room. And so there's a lot of different experiences that I remember of having it, and probably some of the worst were when I saw my family cry. I lost my hair. I remember pulling it out in front of the mirror, like literally just all of it in chunks. And it wasn't until probably 10 years later that my parents told me how bad it was, and that I had the anointing of the sick and all that. And I was shocked because I remember as a kid not ever really feeling like I could die. And I remember thinking that there's something really different about the way that a kid goes through cancer. Like when you're going through cancer as a child, it's kind of as simple as, let me go to the doctor, let me do what I need to do, and then when can I play in the monkey bars? And when you're an adult going through cancer, it's a lot more complicated than that. It's, let me go on Google and find out all the possible things that could happen to me, what are all the what-if situations. And so for a kid going through it, it's simple. And when I went through chemotherapy for a year and a half, and they said it was supposed to take 2 years, and the doctor said, to my parents, they didn't know why it was so fast. And I just remember thinking, like, well, I wonder why that was. And I really feel like it was a lot because as a kid, you can look at something very black and white, and your mind doesn't have a huge effect where you're constantly thinking all of the negative things. So that was a kind of a big, the big thing that I took with me through my life. And so I'm a consultant at Gallup, and one of the things that attracted me to Gallup was that they're interested in what it means to live a life well lived. And so there's research on studying the well-being of people. And so Gallup conducted interviews all over the world, over 160 countries, which I found fascinating, and literally sat down with people one-on-one in each of these countries and asked them questions about their life and their well-being and what it means to live a quality life. And there's several factors that came into play. Probably have heard Deepak talk about some of these, but so there's 5 elements that Gallup came up with, and this is a lot to do with my work that I do at Gallup and my consulting. But I found them fascinating, and it really ties to what happened to me as a kid. So there's 5 elements of well-being. So number 1 is your career well-being. Number 2 is your social well-being. Then there's your financial, physical, and community. And I was fascinated by these because when I was thinking about cancer, I think a lot of the times what happens is we are just focused then on health when we have cancer, but there's your social life has a lot to do with your ability to get rid of that, or what's going on in your finances has a lot, the stress that you might get from your finances or the stress you might get from your relationships has a lot to do with your body's ability to deal with cancer. Same thing with your, whatever your community life is. So I think, part of, when I, thinking about my purpose in the future, having that as a kid and realizing that it's not, just about finding a cure. I raise money for leukemia and lymphoma, but to me it's not just about finding a cure. It's about really understanding your entire life and how all these elements of your well-being can really affect your life and affect your health, and taking those as seriously as you can. And so a big part of it is definitely your mind, but we're all, interconnected, as Deepak always says. And I think now, to what Shahrzad, did I say it right? What she's saying is that, now we're more connected than ever. We have more potential than ever to actually change what's going on in society. And so the more that we can take care of our own well-being and have a better understanding of how each of these elements really affect ourselves, but also affect each other, is something that if we can embody it, I think that message and share it with other people, there's a lot that.
So Danielle is helping the Chopra Foundation along with Gallup. She's my connection to Gallup, to Jim Clifton, the CEO, and we are creating global communities of well-being in these 5 buckets. And that's part of our endeavor right now, and she's getting all the data. You want to know which country is thriving, which country is suffering, which country is struggling. You want to know that about yourself, about your community. That data is available within a minute. And you also know what to do about it. So again, as Ronaldo was saying, it's not that we don't know what needs to be done. We have to care, because love without action is irrelevant, and action without love is meaningless. But when you have the combination of that caring and that data and what needs to be done, it becomes, you can leverage that hugely. The reason I wanted to introduce you to these 4 young women was to say this is an example of spiritual transformation. In systems, in physics, transformation is all about quantities or measurable. It's quanta that are measured. But spiritual transformation cannot be measured in quantitative terms, even though you try to do it. It's an internal phenomenon that changes the quality of your experience of life. And there are amazing examples of that. And every time we do this course in Columbia, cause-driven marketing, just capital, these are the examples we use. And the students are inspired. They come up with their own programs. And in fact, Renata, you have some people now working for you from that course.
I do. I have two of the business students when we spoke at Columbia University that were just so, it's amazing how it's this generation that's so excited about the products and what products represent, like what Shauna was saying, and they just want to attach themselves because they're so connected, like Danielle said, that they understand the purchase of their purchasing power, and they only want to attach themselves to things that are an extension of their own identity. So, I mean, we had so many students that just wanted to come and help the foundation, so it's super, super inspiring.
And Shauna, you have interns coming.
Yeah, as well. Two people that came and actually one's already working with us, one's actually starting, which is pretty amazing. I also think that what's so great, I was just saying this backstage, that all four of us are women. We're all really diverse, and I think it was great to hear President Vicente Fox say that this next era is really the era of women, and I think that all four of us have creative ideas to try to change the world that are non-traditional, and I think that it's great to be able to be an example, hopefully, for other women.
And you can help them create jobs.
That's right.
So 1 finger, 2 fingers, 3, 4. Please give a hand. Social entrepreneurs. Thank you.